go.
I'm telling you.
Jeez. Throwing bottles around.
What did I throw? What are you talking?
Hollering at me and Jesse.
What bottle did I throw?
Your perfume bottle.
I didn't know. It was makeup, and I didn't throw it. I was shaking the dang thing, and it flew out of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
I would never throw a $30 bottle of makeup, ever. To potentially break and not have makeup. And then I'm scraping fucking makeup off the floor trying to not cut my face. I didn't know. I don't know what's going on.
Man.
What?
Nothing. All happy smile.
Toyota San Bernardino Recording Studio presents IE Newswire Daily with Roy Bleckert and Stephanie Meyer. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Yes, we are on a Wicked
Good
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
We're coming in on the show on that. Man, there's the news popping all over the place on that. Tons of stories we had coming up on IEN Newswire on that. Plus, obviously, the big, humongous story of the day. And we got our producer extraordinaire, Jesse, on the deal. Waiting, anticipating the Trump impeachment vote coming up that should be coming up here any few minutes or so. But you never know with Congress. They could take 47.
So they're voting tonight?
They're supposed to.
They're going to send it?
Yes, the House is going to vote on articles of impeachment tonight or sometime. They should have actually voted for it, I think, by now. But as the way the wheels of government works, they go slowly up and down the line. So them finishing early on a government deal is like very, very, very unusual.
Me knowing what you're talking about.
Well, so it could be midnight or the next day before they do that, or
Really?
like they did that with the Judiciary Committee when they got to midnight, and Nadler didn't want to push it from the Judiciary Committee up to the House, and he just called the meeting at Thursday at midnight, and then made everybody come back at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning for a 15-minute deal just to take the vote because they wanted to make a show. They wanted to make the evening news show out of it, so they did that. But that's typically how the sausage is made in the District of Criminals, and it even filters down to our local level because we got some examples of that. We might get to today, or we might not. We might get to some of them today, or in that. But no, the sausage gets made. It's like the old saying. If you watch the sausage getting made, you'd never eat it.
Shut up.
Isn't that true? I mean,
yes, no, definitely.
You watch the sausage and all the goody,
all
innards,
the like little
all
things
the
you can
innards
use,
and everything.
This is what you go with?
Yeah, all the stuff that they put in there.
Stop! You're gonna ruin it. I love Italian sausage during the summer.
Well, I don't know. You don't like fish. You don't
I
like
don't.
eggs. We might as well start crossing sausage. We'll have you down.
No.
We'll have you down to eating what? Maybe
Water?
yeah.
Carrots?
Water, yeah, water and
I've been
broccoli.
gaining weight, please.
Water and broccoli will have you down to eating, and maybe we'll find something contaminated. Well,
Wow,
like
now you're just
usual.
trying to poison me. That's lovely.
There we go. We got Susan on. Yeah, we got our. We got Susan Shelley on the
Oh,
line.
I miss Susan.
Yes.
Hey, great to be with you.
You got an editorial writer for the Press Enterprise, San Bernardino Sun, Inland Daily Bulletin, Redlands Daily Facts, and a gazillion papers all across the Southern California area. Did that with no flaws, but more importantly, Vice President of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. There's a formal introduction. Susan Shelley, welcome back to the show with Stephanie and
you.
Roy.
great to be with you, as always.
Most people don't say that about me. They probably say that. You're probably meaning that about Stephanie.
I do mean it about Stephanie, but also about you, Roy.
Same people like you.
That we get you, and some of your one of your columns that you wrote this week, the FBI bias does that, and you did touch, and we talked about the homeless thing. We've been on that in the Boise case, but obviously the big story of the day is the impeachment, and you wrote about the FBI bias and in there. I mean, this whole thing is just. I mean, and this is what struck me. And I don't know if you've seen. And we ran it with Cliff Cummings, the owner, proprietor of Toyota San Bernardino, which is where we're broadcasting from their studios. Is the thing that really stood out to me is Sunday. I don't know if you watch it with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, and Chris said, "Well, don't you think you should have resigned over all this stuff?" And he said, basically shorthanding it, "No, we were doing worse stuff." I mean, that almost made my head explode.
Well, I was thinking about this today because the only reason any of these abuses came to light is because this was such a high-profile situation.
Yes.
Where they were investigating two presidential candidates in the same race at the same time in two separate investigations. And then you had the Inspector General looking at it to see if there was bias because of what was coming out about these text messages and this sort of thing between the FBI agents who were working on this, other problems involving leaks that came to light through these investigations. What about the investigations of people you've never heard of?
Yes.
What about, you take, for example, some of the anti-terror investigations, or any group of conservatives that someone decides to point a finger at and say, these people are domestic terrorists. Well, on what basis does the FBI open these investigations? It turns out there's really no basis at all. They just, we really ought to see because this might be serious, and they can open a preliminary investigation, and they can use these very intrusive techniques. And if they lie to the FISA court, they can get a surveillance warrant and start collecting everybody's emails all the way back to the year one. It's very, very concerning.
Yes, it is. I mean, used in its proper, and I mean, there are those special circumstances, and that's why they established the FISA court. As if there's extreme circumstances that they have to do that, or there may be an emergency or something of really important national security or something, that you have to cut through the process, and you understand that. But that power should be that authority or power or use of that should be used very, very, very sparingly, and should have a lot of. And you should not anywhere in the process do something that is not part of the protocol law or anything of that, because if you start violating like it is today, our republic as we know it is lost.
And it's one of the things that's so concerning is that people like James Comey, who signed these warrants, take no responsibility for the fact that they were full of lies, and in some cases fabricated evidence. So is his story he doesn't know, he didn't know, he shouldn't have known? We have safeguards in place, but if these people will not abide by them and will not take them seriously, we have no way to catch the fact that this is going on because it's all in secrecy. And that is really frightening.
It is, and that's what and even delving further into the Fox News Chris Wallace interview, he acted like, "Oh, I'm over 34,000 agents. I didn't have time to do this." No, that is total. Yeah, you're investigating the president. Let's forget about Carter Page. You're investigating the presidential candidate became president of the United States. The head of the FBI is totally oblivious to what's going on in this very big, important case of that, and he's not getting updates or calling or knowing what's going on or getting daily or weekly briefings on what is going on in that particular case. Bull hockey.
It is, and they knew that this dossier from Christopher Steele was unverified garbage, and yet Comey went to the Oval Office, or Trump Tower, I guess, to brief the president about it after he was elected, to brief Trump, and he said, well, it's unverified and it's salacious, but the media, they have it, and we think you should be aware of it. That has a real overtone of a threat to it. It's like, I have stuff on you, I can release it, I can be the source on background. All of that is implied, in the fact that he was presenting this to Donald Trump, this unverified nonsense, and they knew it was nonsense, and they not only used it to get 3 renewals of this FISA warrant on Carter Page, but they used it in a way that was potentially an intimidation tactic against the newly elected President of the United States. This is just appalling. This is the J. Edgar Hoover kind of thing that used to go on. And, the FISA court itself is a reform because of what went on during the Nixon years, where he put the CIA on the FBI, and the IRS was told to go audit enemies of the president. And there were all these abuses of various types of intelligence and surveillance, and that's why we had all these laws afterwards, including this Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, to put controls on how this stuff was used, because it is in secret. And you can't have the press overseeing it. You can't have the public overseeing it. You can't even have most of the Congress overseeing it. So there are these specific requirements. They have a heightened duty of candor. That's what it says in the law. They are required to be truthful and accurate. And they even added a layer of extra corrections called the Woods procedures in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks, because they were finding errors in some of these surveillance warrant applications. So they added a bunch of extra requirements for keeping stuff on file to show the accuracy of everything in the application. But that was not followed in the Trump investigation. And that's one of the things in the Inspector General's report. It's very long, but every page of it is full of stuff that should really keep you up at night. It's very scary stuff.
Yes, it is, and I just to segue into reading the comments from Mike. Yeah, stay tuned. We're going to cover some of the stuff about the IE and some of the stuff that's going on in that, so stay tuned. But yeah, you're absolutely right of what's going on in this stuff. It's absolutely scary. But I want to ask Stephanie, because she was kind of like bypassing that, or of
What?
the stuff of the stuff of the FISA court and all the stuff that's going on, and especially of our investigative law enforcement agencies lying, just cutting through people's civil rights of that. I mean, do you kind of get the gravity of this stuff now, or?
I don't know what you're talking about, and I like to stay out of that bubble, and I'm a lot happier.
But yeah, but it like I told you before, said you would not be happy if those arrows were pointed at you.
I know, I wouldn't be, but it's just it's scary to think that kind of stuff's really going on, and I think people my age or my generation, or people that act the same way I do, we don't pay attention to it, because it's like you almost feel helpless, and then it's terrifying to know that the stuff you see on TV where it's like crazy, like that's not really happening in real life, is actually really happening in real life.
Yeah,
and my kids are growing up in that.
Welcome to and that's
it's scary.
That should be the biggest reason why you should be concerned.
So if I ignore it, then
if you ignore it,
and I let you do it.
No, if you ignore it,
it's just scary.
Then it is, and there's power.
And I'm so lost on all that. Like when I first started doing the show, you guys started talking about all the politics stuff, and I mean, I know like the basic general stuff. I know who the president is, but you start throwing out all this other stuff, and it's It's like intimidating almost.
But do you see why it's
like,
important?
Can we dumb it down for blondes like me?
Yes, and we are kind of doing that, I hope. But that's what we're trying to do. It is personalize it so you are, because there's power in numbers.
Yeah, well, too, like how you're saying right now, if you can relate to it, you're gonna grasp it
and
more.
And it's even more
hillbilly talking about it. Like,
it's even more important that people of your generation, let's say 40 and below, or that are in there, that really pay attention, because if they start seeing the younger set, start asking questions instead of being led like sheep to the slaughter.
Right.
Then you would be surprised how much that is going to pay attention. They are banking on exactly what you're talking about, that you're going to try and ignore it, put it out of your psyche, your thought pattern, and hope it's go away. But that's exactly the opposite of what will happen. If you ignore it and don't do nothing, pretty soon, guys like me ain't going to be, and gals like Susan are not going to be around, and it's going to be on your watch. And then, like I say a lot, after the fact is too late.
Right. No, I agree.
Well, what's at issue here is what makes America a free country.
Yes.
One of the things that makes us a free country is that the government has limits on its power. And one of the limits is the Fourth Amendment, which they can't go searching around through your stuff looking for crimes without a warrant from a judge that specifically describes what they're looking for, why they're looking for it. They can't just go on fishing expeditions to see if people are obeying the law. That's not allowed, because if that happens, we're not a free country. That's a really fundamental, back to the 18th century and before, foundation of freedom. So what this surveillance stuff does is totally violate that. They go open an investigation. They say, well, we think someone's a foreign agent because we heard a rumor. It turns out then that the rumor is from a political opponent or someone else who's malicious and someone who's out to get you. So if they feed something to the FBI opens one of these investigations. Then they lie to a secret court that's supposed to grant the warrant. They lie to the court. They get a warrant. Well, now the government is collecting your emails, your phone calls, eavesdropping on your conversations. They can't do that. That is the end of freedom in America. And this is fundamental stuff. You have the right not to be harassed by your government and not to be surveilled by your government. And so there's a standard. We're all concerned. We want to make sure the country is safe, but we want to be safe from our own government too, not just from foreign threats. Foreign threats can actually do less damage to us than we can do to ourselves.
Amen on that, and that's why I say that's the reason this needs to be that, and I think and to get part of the thing, and I think again, like we talked about it with Cliff yesterday and Dwayne that called in on that. I mean, I think this whole thing. I mean, and I was in complete agreement with Cliff. I think when they get to the Senate, this should be a full-blown trial. Bring up every witness you want on there, because I think this has the biggest potential to backfire on the Democrats. I don't really think if they which they are, they're going to push this up to the Senate. Well, let's make a big show. Let's put all the cards 100% up on the table and let everybody see, like I said, how the sausage was made and what was done to get this stuff done. Because I think if that, and you're starting to see the cracks, and I want to get your opinion of it, but I think one congressman is wavering or thinking of switching Republican in the Congress. Two, and then one in the state house. And like I said, the main time I remember this is when Reagan first got elected, and there was like 20 or 30 of them in the House that switched parties on that. We haven't seen party switching coming on that much on that, but I think the potential to do this, and I think the potential to forget Democrat, Republican, to start swinging the pendulum, and especially in California, which is way over to the left, let's start pulling it back to the center, back where we should be.
Absolutely. Well, there's no question this is going to backfire on the Democrats. It's already showing up in the polls. On the CNN website, there's a writer named Chris Feliza, and he was looking at the Gallup poll, and something like 5 or 6 points, it's already swung against impeachment and in favor of the president. And there's good reason for that. People can be watching from a distance, and they can think, oh, I guess the president did something really terrible. But then you get to the all-day gavel-to-gavel TV coverage, and people are watching, and they're saying, well, okay, what did he do? And he didn't do anything. and the polls will turn because there's nothing there. He didn't do anything. And it's so funny to watch the Democrats moaning about abuse of power. It makes me want to dig through the archives and get out all the Clinton scandals, the FBI files and all the rest of it, the cattle futures with Hillary Clinton, and all these things that they did that were abuses of power to one extent or another. And the Democrats didn't care about any of that. They didn't care about the email scandal that she was deliberately defying the Freedom of Information Act by hiding all of her official correspondence on a private server where it could not be searched for those information requests, which are lawfully allowed. She didn't want anything searched. And then all the deletions, and then the Clinton Foundation being under criminal investigation. What was that except a cash for favors operation? And you look at all of this, and the Democrats are like, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. Oh, Trump. And, it's just comical. It's not going to pass the laugh test the further they go with this. So my prediction is this gets to the Senate, and impeachment is going to go exactly the way Merrick Garland went, which is to say, gone, over.
Yes.
The dogs may bark, but the caravan moves on. It's going to be over.
I mean, not that I do, but I mean the ones, and especially the extreme left wing that's been pushing this, the Jerry Nadlers, and we pointed out how the other one, Schiff from out here, was pushing that. And I mean, everything that Devin Nunes said in 2018 when he was the head of the Judiciary Committee and said all this stuff was going on, the IG Horowitz stamped it like almost 100%. And they were trying to get Nunes out there saying he's crazy, he should be removed from office. The dominant media was playing this right along with this whole narrative. And all of a sudden, you don't hear anything about the abuse of power of this. What about the abuse of power of the FBI? I mean, if anything close is going, Comey saying
very serious. And you know
we were doing worse.
What we're probably going to find out is that it was the CIA that created that initial contact in Australia that allowed the FBI to say, well, yes, this is suspicious, we should open an investigation. It was probably a setup from the CIA, because that's what's sort of implied by John Durham, the prosecutor, when he said, based on our investigation, which can look at other agencies of the government, we don't agree with your finding that this was correctly predicated and that there was a good basis to open this. So I think that's where this is going, is the CIA was used to start the FBI investigation. And then after Comey was fired, and rightfully so, he was fired, then we got these leaks that Comey did, illegal leaks of material that he took from the FBI and kept in his personal safe at home as sort of a little insurance in case he ever needed to ruin somebody. He had these memos that he had written himself that were supposedly conversations as he took notes on them with Donald Trump, and he started releasing these selectively through a friend. They end up in the New York Times. Everybody calls for a special counsel. Well, now this so-called counterintelligence investigation has turned into a criminal investigation. And now we're in a whole different world. There's supposed to be a different standard for collecting evidence in a criminal investigation, where the counterintelligence investigation is more loosey-goosey about the rules. When you get into criminal court, that's a whole different thing. And yet it all blurred together, and we had 2 years of people saying, oh, yes, we're going to get Donald Trump. He's a criminal. And he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything.
Yes.
And we've wasted all this time where the country could have been having just peace and prosperity, and it would have been so nice. But no, we're going to have continuous apocalypse all the time over nothing. It's really interesting when you back up and you say, why are they doing this? I think where we are is that there are people on the liberal side who have had a long-term, slow-motion plan to move public opinion in a socialist direction for various policies that they wanted and control of different things that they wanted to have. And Donald Trump comes in and he blows up their plan because he succeeds with the opposite. He succeeds with freedom and less government and tax cuts and deregulation, and he won't buy into the Paris Accord and the rest of the things that cause Americans to have to spend their money on other countries for no reason. He won't buy into that. He has blown up all their so-called progress, and I think they can never, ever forgive him for it. They're just going to try and hound him to the grave.
Few minutes
Hope
left.
he's taking care of his health.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that because there was the Boise case. The Supreme Court didn't take it up. Kind of throwed a monkey wrench in the homeless deal. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's really disappointing. The Ninth Circuit issued this ruling that has prevented cities from enforcing a ban on camping on the sidewalk, unless they can show that they have enough shelter beds for everyone who wants them. Well, the practical implications of that as a policy are not practical at all. I mean, are they supposed to go out and do a point-in-time count every single night to see how many people are on the streets, and then call all the shelters and say, how many beds do you have available? And if it doesn't match, they can or can't issue citations. The whole thing is just irrational. But the Ninth Circuit ruling does not require cities to leave encampments standing day and night or permanent structures on the sidewalk. That's not required. But the cities are doing that. They're allowing it because there's no practical way to clear them every morning. We don't have the manpower. It's not practical. And then you have all these lawyers that jump in and say, well, based on what the Ninth Circuit has said, we think what you're doing is illegal. And then the cities are sued every single day. So it would have been nice if the Supreme Court had stepped in and reviewed that case and overturned it and sent it back for something with a little more clarity. But even without that, there's no reason that the situation has to be what it is, and it's really up to the voters to hold these politicians accountable, to enforce public health and safety laws, and to build enough temporary shelters and emergency shelters so that people who are willing to be helped can be helped, and people who are not willing to be helped can be removed from the streets anyway, whether they're arrested or they're just moved. We do not have to have this situation where people are living on the streets, wandering around in traffic, on the sides of freeways, permanent encampments along bike paths and riverbeds. It doesn't have to be like this. The court decisions do not really require it to be like this. We have to blame our politicians for this. They have been cynically using this issue for their own policy purposes.
I think this whole deal is going to have the potential of making me a very rich man, because this is what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose building tent bed cities in Mojave, Lancaster, every desert place on that. And I'm going to get all the municipalities who want to participate. We're going to have plenty of beds. Yeah, we're going to bus you 3 hours to because it doesn't say where that shelter has to be as far as I'm reading. So yes, we have beds available. Do you want them? If you say no, you're going to the Gray Bar Motel.
Exactly. You can't really have a policy that you can pitch a tent in Beverly Hills and then Beverly Hills has to give you a house. You really can't have that policy.
Right.
That's a movie script, but it's not really a policy.
And I think that, again, okay, well, they throw us a little curveball. Okay, then you just learn how to hit the curveball out of the park just like you do a fastball. And I think that's the way out of this. If we really have our act together on this, and that, I think we can pull this off on the deal and solve this problem. Because, okay, you want to go this route? Okay, you didn't say what, how, and what and why. This is how we're going to do it. You want a bed? Okay, there's a bed here. 3 hours down the road. You want to get, the bus leaves in about 2 hours. You want to get on that, or you're going to the Gray Bar Motel, and see how that whole enchilada works out. Susan Shelley, thanks for being on, enlightening us, giving you your insights on the whole subjects at hand, and hopefully that impeachment vote comes out and we can have see what's going to happen in the Senate on that deal, and along with that, we'll solve this homeless crisis along the way.
I like your ideas. I'm on board with that. Take care. Great to be with you.
You got it.
Bye,
Thanks.
Suzanne.
Thanks, Stephanie.
That was fun.
Stop talking about sausages and enchiladas. You're ruining my dinner. That was my takeaway from all of that.
There you go. No, I was doing that, but to get to Mike's point, he wanted to know what was going on in the IE, or what's happening to solve the drug problem on that. So roll up the IE Newswire deal and get to the story of what happened in Moreno Valley yesterday on that, with the big crime sweep that was going on that, and we will show you what's going on. Blow the picture up a little bit. I highlighted the one of all that. 110 arrests, 36 felonies on a Moreno Valley crime sweep going across at the Riverside Sheriff's Department. I think there was about 100 of their personnel came out and swept the streets of Moreno Valley free of a whole bunch of criminals that were doing that. This is what we have to have, and this is what I'm saying about the whole deal. About this is the next step, I think, of that. And I mean, I kind of said that jokingly about the tent cities, but that's what we have to come. We have to come up with some idea with the Supreme Court not picking up the case and the Boise deal standing. Okay, we're going to give you a choice. We got a bed over here. We got a bed somewhere. If there's a municipality anywhere in the state of California, we can put a network on there. They can go boom, boom, boom on the cell phone, computer, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we got a space for you somewhere. Now, okay, you got a choice. You can either take this, or you're going to have to face the consequences of the law. That way you could have the deal like it's in Boise, or where they said, doesn't matter. If the municipality decides, for public safety reasons, we are not going to have people camping on the sidewalks in our parks and anything else, you pass the ordinance, okay, we are providing you the means to have that bed facility or a shelter facility for you when at whenever at your beck and call and transportation and all that to work out. So that lets our government officials and our law enforcement agencies have the ability to make our communities safer, cleaner, more attractive, an all around greater place to live.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there because Ann just wrote in. I'm not exactly sure how true this is, but she put that, or accurate, Trump just impeached for abuse of power.
So get on the internet or Newswire to see what the vote is on that. That was that was probably the first article of impeachment going on. Yeah, we figured thought the vote was going to be on before we got, but they're finally actually voting for it. So they usually take 15 minutes for that. So if the first vote is in, they're probably another 15 minutes for the second round of the deal. But no, and I applaud the sheriff's department. That is exactly the kind of things they have been doing and they are doing right now in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, cleaning up our neighborhoods like this. And if you're a criminal, I think maybe they're starting to get the message. If you're a criminal hanging around in Riverside County area, might not be a good idea.
Amen.
And that's a thing. So, Mike, you asked for some what's going on about what we're
And he
doing.
wants positive news, too.
Well, that's positive, isn't it?
I think he wants, feel-good stories. So I'm going to make it a mission once the holidays go away to always have a fun, feel-good story to talk about for at least 5 minutes.
So that's your assignment. You come up with the fun,
I know,
feel-good.
I gave me my own assignment.
Yes, that's your job. Come up with the fun, feel-good story.
And then I'll come with a catchy name, too.
There you go. But he asked about, what are we doing to treat the drug addicted and all
He
that.
did.
And I mean, that's you've got to get him in a situation. We got to figure out how we are going to get them into a situation that we can, if nothing else, if we can't help, or if they don't want the help, at least they're in a area where we know where they're at and they're not affecting the rest of us out in our public areas.
Right. I'm going to get knocked out right now. It's not my fault.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
we could talk about that. But no,
things being my fault.
that's a roll up some of the, or if you do, are you looking for the impeachment vote? Yeah. On that, haven't found anything. Really, that should be like a number one on the deal. But no, it's a.
But thank you, Ann, for writing in and letting us know.
Yes, of that on that. See what the vote is on that. Because it's absolutely incredulous that these things are going on. I mean, lots, and the thing it is, and I don't know why it goes in streams, but there must have been 3 or 4 or 5 public all across the IE of sex offender arrests today that they publicized, which is I mean, it kind of seems like it's weird how it goes in these waves. You don't get any for 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden, boom, they go up. But no, again, our law enforcement officers are making, this is what they're doing. And I mean,
they're kicking butt lately, too.
Yes.
They're doing really good.
And that's part of what, I mean, I take that as a positive, that they're actually,
No, it is a positive, but I think people want, the look at the cute little puppies and the kids kind of things.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how they tune in. It's all about, and a lot of the news gets driven by what it's
trending. That's what I was trying to explain, too. A lot of people the negative always seems to outweigh the positive because people have more to say on negative than positive.
Well, it's not part of that, but yeah, that's why you get that. You get, companies that are in the news business or anything like that are into making money. And the reason you see that is because that's what attracts people. That's what attracts the audience. And you can see it in the numbers. I can do it because again, I've kind of went over the whole thing that was before, but the short story human behavior. Everybody says, "Oh, we want the positive stuff." Da 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 da. You put that out there, it's like crickets. You put the negative stuff, kaboom! Everybody pays attention to it. Da 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 da. So my old saying that I came up with is, I don't necessarily pay attention to what you say. I pay attention to how you react. And that really tells the true story of how you feel. Because a lot of people are embarrassed or think, well, I don't want to say this or look bad if I'm doing that. But when when it comes down to the brass tacks, that's what the vast majority of people react to.
So Diane writes in, vote article, 1 abuse of power. Democrats, 230 yes. Republicans, 197 no. Independent, 1 yes. Democrat voting no on impeachment, 2 number votes. Democrats 1, Republicans 2, present Democrat 1. Does that make any sense to you? Because it does not make any sense to me.
Yeah, that means that he's been formally impeached on 1 article. Now there seems to be a couple that have crossed over, 1 or 2 Democrats that have voted, because there was a big speculation of how many Democrats were not going to vote for it, which it seems like there's only been 1 or 2, or vote against it, I should say. But it seems like it's pretty much cut on party lines, across the board on the whole enchilada, which everybody pretty much figured it was going to be. And Nancy Pelosi said, "Oh well, we're not going to bring this up unless it's a bipartisan, deal," which was was a total lie, because if they would have done that, so no, you had 2 Democrats voting no on impeachment. You had no Republicans voting yes. So it's been the only bipartisan, if I'm reading this right, the only bipartisan vote on this is a vote not to impeach Donald Trump, because you only got Democrats to vote for no. You got no Republicans to vote yes on impeachment. So the only bipartisan part of that vote that is a vote not to impeach Donald John Trump as president of the United States, but the Democrats are done with it. And like I said, when your opponent is in a hole and they're digging and they keep digging, you hand them shovels so they dig themselves deeper. And that's exactly what the Democrats are doing in this whole enchilada on that. Roll up the IE Newswire timeline and see what...
Some other bad news. There's no Thursday night football this week.
They
I just
canceled
realized
Thursday night football. But there's one of
why.
the sex
happy about
offenders. Yeah, there's one of them that was caught in a helmet. Roll up to the next one of that. We'll run through these. Oh, this is the one. Remember I said we're going to post a story every day, and we need to look for these? We unfortunately, there was a UPS driver, a couple weeks ago, that lost his life, and, where some bank robbers are robbing a store, hijacked his truck, and they eventually wind up shooting him. This is the opposite side of the story in Philadelphia. Some guy was, he's delivering packages like like FedEx drivers do by the thousands all across the country. He's in a Philadelphia neighborhood. He gets out. Somebody's is going to rob him. Shoots the guy in the stomach. Shoots the FedEx driver in the stomach. So it doesn't say what. So I'm assuming whatever he has, 9mm. The very smart and prudent FedEx driver had a 9mm 45 or some sort of weapon
Stories. That's what you're talking
on with him. So he opened fires on the one who's attempting to rob him. So the cops are called, obviously, and they transport him. And the good news is the FedEx driver is in the hospital in stable condition. Looks like he's going to recover from his injuries, but the cops found about a block down the road or so the suspect deader than a doornail, with about 4 or 5 gunshot wounds in him. So this is a proper use, and why, especially probably Philadelphia. I'm probably going to say this is probably a dangerous neighborhood or whatever, because there's a few of those in Philly. This guy if he wouldn't have had a firearm, he would have probably been looking at the roots of the grass right now.
Exactly.
Now the suspect of the attempted robbery is the one who's going to be looking at the roots of the grass. We are minus 1 criminal person who's not going to infiltrate the gene pool anymore. And the the citizens of Philadelphia should be celebrating in the streets because there's not going to be no expensive trial to put this guy through because he is dead.
Wow.
So this is the difference, and
Your
not
delivery is horrible.
to make light of the guy of the UPS driver in Florida, I think, that lost his life over that. But if he would have had a firearm, maybe he might be alive today, like the FedEx driver is in this. So we applaud the proper and best use of firearms, and you don't hear these stories like you do when you hear the opposite side when somebody is committing a crime. So that's that's the importance of this story and the catch-22. I mean, if I was a UPS driver or something, I would not do that job unless I was carrying a hog iron of some kind with me, because you never know when you're going to encounter this type of situation. And if I was going to do that job, I would want to have the best chance of me surviving in a dangerous situation like that, like the FedEx driver did, versus the unfortunate situation we suffered with the UPS driver in that. Here's the one. Which one is this? Oh, real reason Sears is going out of business. Yes, up in Richmond, California, they were doing ghetto shopping in that. People were just all of a sudden look like younger adults maybe that were on the deal. Yeah, they just decided they were going to loot the whole store.
Oh my god.
Yes, of going in and out of the store on that of one of the Sears' closing. So
wow.
there you go. It's just
they can't even get through the door.
Oh,
yeah, they're fighting.
Right, there's some people are trying to stop
security.
them. Yeah, they're trying to stop them going out the door. But
What idiots.
that's something that. Yeah, I mean you.
Wow.
And it's stuff like this that happens all the time on that. So thanks to Laura for posting that on IE Newswire on that.
Real reasons here's going.
Yes, real reasons. Well, hey, we can get into that later maybe on that, but I mean, I can tell you about some story. There's another one of the sex offenders that was arrested, accused of sexual assault of an 8-year-old girl in a daycare facility.
Oh my god! How did he get in there? Was he like a family member?
Yeah, I think so. It was in a daycare in a residence up in Victorville. So I'm assuming he had it has every indication that he had access to the home or whatever on that. But that's another. So that's why I say these things. It's kind of weird how these things go in waves like that. Roll the next one up. Oh, here's another one.
Seriously?
Fontana, yes, Fontana. Fontana police arrested this guy for distribution. I'll get it out, and possession of child pornography.
Wow.
That roll up to the next one on the enchilada on that. That's about the impeachment one. There you go. And we'll have to have Bo Yarborough on. He's a great reporter for the Press Enterprise. He maps out the cost of what most people in Riverside County. How much do you think the average household in how much obligation do you think you have per household in Riverside County on pension debt? How much do you think you owe?
On what?
Pension debt. Unfunded public employees pension debt.
I don't know.
About 60 grand.
So much.
You
I
owe
owe 60 grand?
Yes.
Can I borrow some money?
Not today.
How much do you think you owe? Do you owe the
Every
same?
household in here owes $60,000 of public employee pension. If you don't think it's a problem, again, you pointed out Jeff Hewitt up at the County Board of Supervisors is the only one that actually made an issue of it. The other four just seem to kick it down the can. We'll get into that next year on the stuff. Maybe we'll have Jeff in studio, and maybe we'll have Bo on the phone too of that. On that, there's the deal about voting. Alley, Missouri, which is called in candidate for 61st Assembly District, and a few others with Mark Mauser, who was a candidate for Secretary of State, called in or filed a lawsuit on that, trying to get our trying to protect our voting rights and some of the irregularities in that stuff. So it's a whole enchilada of what's going on. So yeah, roll up to the next one on that. Oh. He's impeached on. Well, that was. I imagine the vote was probably pretty close to the same. Yeah, we're back down to there. So roll my video number 1 of this is Roy at the school board last night. The school board of Moreno Valley, as traditional most at the end of the year, whether it's a city council, that they elect new presiding board officers, or sometimes it's appointed a mayor who's going to control the meetings, yada yada yada. So, and it's usually the tradition that the vice president, you usually have a president, vice president, and clerk at the school board. You have 3 positions, 1, 2, 3. Usually, in the tradition is the vice president gets moved up to the president's position on that and all that, and that's kind of there's no set rule, but that's just kind of how most things go on this. So, the Moreno Valley Unified School District School Board had their officers election for that, and of course that's in a public hearing. And there was one citizen out of 200,000 that rolled up to the podium and made this little speech.
That is Mr. Roy Blacker. And you have 3 minutes.
So, the yearly organizational meeting, and I want to endorse 2 people for president and vice president of the board. First, Daryl Peden for president of the Board of Education for 2020, and Dr. Locke for vice president. And the reason behind this is that the recent evaluations and performance evaluations, those 2 asked the most pertinent questions of what we should be doing in the school district, or to try and find the answers to do the best way. And the reason I think that maybe, and I know the tradition is there's kind of a hierarchy and you move that up, maybe this time we need to break from tradition. Because I think those 2 on the board understand what it is to be an elected official and what their role is. Their role is to set the policy and ask sometimes the tough questions, or the questions that need to be asked. And they're not doing it, I think, as Dr. Locke pointed out, as necessarily a criticism or something. It's to find out the answers so they can make the best decisions when all of these agenda items come up. And I've said it many times at many public meetings. I am comfortable with any decision any board makes as long as they're making it on true and accurate information. What I find out in a lot of cases in this, and I've been to a few of these meetings before and seen the reports and put things in, as a lot of times the board is presented in a skewed way or not presented all the facts and information on there. And that's sometimes why we wind up having problems, or not doing the best that we can do no matter what the agency is. So I think in this point forward, as we are, and maybe it's not technically correct, but in 2020, let's just say it's a new decade, maybe we need to start some new traditions. Maybe we need to mix it up a little bit. Maybe we need to try something different. We all know the definition of insanity. Do the same thing over and over again and hope for a different result. I think in a lot of cases, we all hope for different results, and we hope for the best results. Sometimes the best results are when you go in there and shake things up, when you break for tradition, when you try new ideas, and you try new things, and you actually get in and work in and roll up your sleeves and do the nuts and bolts of the things sometimes we might not like to do, or we might not like to address, but we have to address because it's for the benefit not only of the students, but the community as a whole. So I hope you take this into consideration when you make your vote tonight, and I hope you might see things in a different light. Thank you.
Okay, stop it there. So what's
Thank you for your comments.
So what's your impression? What's your impression, comments of what I said?
I mean, do you want my honest opinion?
Yeah. No, I want your dishonest opinion. No, tell me.
First of all, how you plan your little speeches to the 3-minute mark on point every time, it drives me insane. Like, the timing is perfect. However, Everyone was so happy and like cheerful, and then you come up and it's like everyone's just like bummed out.
Well, I
Because
heard
we
a
were
lot.
doing
I
like
heard a lot of applause in there at the end of the.
I don't. But there was people clapping.
Yes,
Hmm.
you should. And it's really funny. It's a thing you bring. It's really funny, and I'm not going to think out the
No,
people.
but
that
I
are-
don't think that honestly nobody knew. Even I didn't know that was happening. So I think when you went up there and you were talking, everybody was like, "What?" And then that took place, and then it kind of clicked. Like it didn't click while you were talking. You know what I mean? Because no one knew what the hell you were talking about. Because no one knew that they were gonna do the whole vote thing. Stop acting like you're some freaking god, Roy.
Jeez. So, no, it isn't. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to think anybody out, but even a lot of those, you ought to see, it's really interesting this is when you walk away from that and like you see.
No, I heard people
all
talking
all
to
the
you,
people
but
like
people
I'm-
are like quiet, like.
Yes, yes, exactly. I get that all the time on that. So
No, I heard people talking to you when you left, but it's just I don't know.
But no, I mean, just overall of that, and we'll get into the results here in a little bit of how it went. But sometimes it takes sometimes, and like we were talking about with why you should pay attention to this. If you really want your schools or your city government or to clean this stuff up,
Right.
homelessness, you need to be engaged. You kind of say that of how. It drives you insane that I can pinpoint that right to the zero and in my in my speech right on the 000. Well, it's because I go up there and do it.
I know.
I didn't do, when I first started it. I couldn't do that. But I'll tell you that this brings up a great little story. Jay Wilner, he was the bailiff at the city of Moreno Valley. Which is the guy that did.
Someone come save me.
You hand your speaker slips to that. So. They're calling my name up there. 2 or 3 years ago when he was doing that. So I leaned over and said, "Watch this." So I did the same thing, and I did it, and like I said, I hit it right at 000. I hit the deal, and he goes, "You SOB," and he's cracking, because he didn't know what I was referring to, but he said, "Just watch this," and I'm smiling at it as I watch it. But no, it's just the experience of doing it and delivering that and knowing how to put that. Again, you're constantly adjusting, and look, if you notice in a little bit of tips of how I do that. So I'm looking at the clock. So I mean, I'm kind of doing that. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, when I get to 2 minutes, I know I got to go here. Okay, adjust this out. And then like when you hear the beep on the 30 seconds, which is cool on at the school board, you got to start pruning it down and getting down to your point. But it's just like the experience of doing it, and it will serve you well, because like I've said many times. Is you can have all the great ideas in the world. If you cannot communicate them, 98.7% of the time they're going nowhere.
Right.
So somebody somewhere has to communicate that. And that's what I'm saying about this. Look at breaking with tradition. Look at doing that stuff. You never know. You never can
I
tell
want to break traditions.
when you can have an effect on things or how things might be perceived. Sometimes people go, "Why do you go up there do that?" And most of the time they don't do that. Why don't they do that? But it's in cases like this is where you can be effective, and you can be effective on the overall setting of the tone of the policy on that. Because if you're holding the deal, roll the rest. Are you holding that video from where we are? Of that one.
Random writes in, "Way to go, Roy. It only takes one rock to start a mudslide. Glad to have a voice out there." Brandon, please log off on the video, and thanks for being thank you for being a fan for as long as you were.
Pick up if you don't have it, I can do that. So they went. So board president Jesus Holguin made the motion to nominate Vice President C.J. Johnson, and there was no second.
Question.
Yes.
So did he have to step down? Like, was his term over?
No, they could have voted.
They could have kept him there,
They could have,
right?
yeah. They can do it any way they want. It's just the tradition of that. That's how the tradition is. Everybody rotates the positions every year, so everybody gets a shot at being president, vice president,
okay.
and just a regular board member, or not having that responsibility. I mean, there's no real difference other than. the president is the presiding officer of the meeting, so he controls the meeting, calls that da da da. He's got a little bit more latitude in making that. Now, 3 members of the board can overrule any decision he makes, but you have a lot of who's ever you have really a position of responsibility because you're the one that's running the meeting basically. So that's why the president is probably got the most responsibility, probably a better way of saying it. So back to that, Jesus Holguin, which was board president, C.J. Johnson was vice president. So Mr. Holguin nominates C.J. Johnson for president. They didn't even get a second. So that means you have to have a second on a motion to call the vote. They didn't even get a second. So board member Susan Smith does it and says, okay, I nominate Marcia Locke for president. And they made the vote, and it went 5-0, and she got in. And then Darrell Peden got in as vice president, and Susan Smith was elected clerk. So get ready to roll video, too, because this is when the room's all cleaned out and all the awards are gone and all that stuff. And it's like about 9:30 at night after all this. So go ahead.
9:30 at night. These poor board people have to listen to him at 9:30 at night.
There you go. Well,
thank you. Okay, our last speaker is Roy Bleckert.
So stop it right there.
Can I get 6 minutes too?
Back it up just a tad, just to set it up so you know what I'm talking about on the first part. They have a rule in there which I think they didn't quite do it right. But if you come up there, let's say you speak Spanish or German or something, you have 3 minutes to talk. They will give you an additional 3 minutes to have an interpreter. Well, one of the speakers before me actually did it and got 6 minutes because he was interpreting himself for that. And I think that's a violation of the law or violation of the intent of the law because you're not supposed to be able to get 6 minutes to do it in 2 languages. It's there for the board members or people to have a translation. If you can't speak English, that they have that. So this is the reason why I said so you put it into context so you know what I'm talking about when you hear the first comment. So go ahead and roll it.
Can I get 6 minutes too? Because some claim they cannot understand my hillbilly dialect. So could I translate that too?
Stop it right there.
Hey, I had to duck out a little bit.
This is why I hide when I go to board meetings. I don't know him. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no, it is. When you make light of a situation like that, put a little more humor to it or something. Like you're saying, I'm not up there screaming and yelling, but I did it tongue in cheekish like that, but say, kind of just a little bit of warning of, review your policy and make sure you do, because if this starts proliferating, we're going to be there till 3:00 in the morning if everybody starts doing this. And that was not the intent of the law. So I just kind of put a little subliminal deal to, take a look at this. So go ahead and let it rip.
After my first comments, but I see it looks like it went Marcia, Darrell, Susan on the deal. That might be there might be a little bit of strategy behind that. Or, maybe you got a little dyslexic. So maybe sometimes things work out the way they do. One thing I want to do, probably in the top 3 of the most accessible people around here. If you want to know what I'm really thinking or what really is happening when it pertains to me, just call and ask. Sometimes, and what really brought it up, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier about the data and the reports, I've asked about the dashboards. We seem to be driving by that. Second thing is what I really noticed is, there is in a 4-year period, the math scores went up 7 points. Check out the English scores and see if the data is accurate. I said that, and that's why I said that. And I say it many times. If the board is getting complete and accurate information, I have no problem with the decisions they make. What I do have a problem with is when the board, any board, public agency, those in the capacity to make the decisions are getting inaccurate information. And when I see it, that makes me question what else is not accurate in these reports. That's why it's very important that we do have elected boards, because they are that buffer, they are our representatives to make sure that what we are getting in our schools, in our cities, in our federal governments is proper representation. So, I think, and I'm glad this board did look forward. We're going to try something different. We broke with tradition. Maybe that's a sign that in the next decade we'll be moving onward and upward to greater heights. Because sometimes, like I said, you got to shake up the apple cart. Sometimes you got to look at things a little different. Sometimes you got to look at things in a different perspective if you want a better result. So like I say, when you're looking at this, and I will say this, was Gary Baugh right about the elections when he made his prediction? Like I said, if you want to know what I'm thinking, just ask.
I don't want to know what you're thinking. I'm so serious.
No, but is it and this is how the conversations, I think, this is how you get better, is if you have conversations about this. And you talk honestly about it. It's not about, it's everybody's perspective that puts together that makes things work. No one person has the answers to everything. But if you have honest debate, honest discussions, meaningful discussions about substantive issues that are what's going on, and you leave the attitudes and all that stuff around, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish of that stuff. So that was the point I was trying to make. And to wrap it up, and they'd have the deal. They went to 11 o'clock on the deal, and they still hadn't done all their agenda items. So they had to do that. And the former president, who is now Jesus Holkeen, was out there going, oh, well, we should extend the meeting and stuff. And this is why I said what I did. Darrell Peden stood up, board member, and said, why do we keep doing this? Why do we start our business meeting at 9 o'clock at night? Why do we go 2 hours with all this stuff,
Right.
all that? And I will say this, and it was at California State Board Association, which is what a lot of the school members, a representative was there, and all our guys were there at the time 2 or 3 years ago. And I asked the question, because I brought this up many times. I said, well, how much time do you spend at your board meeting, the one that was given the president? How much time when you were a board member did you spend on awards and doing that? And she said, maybe 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes at the most, and we were done, and we went on with that. And like I said, I proposed, my proposal was to go from 6 to 7. You got an hour, do all your awards. That gets the kids home way before time. They can, eat dinner, do their homework, yada, yada, yada. Keeping the kids there till 8:30, 9 o'clock is not a good idea. And Darrell did make that point. He said, we can't keep doing this and going on till midnight and stuff and waiting that, because the arcane procedure they have at Moreno Valley Unified School District is you have to turn in your speaker slip if you want to speak at 7 o'clock. Sometimes we have waited till 10 o'clock before they did. And that's why I made that comment, because after the organizational meeting was like 7, like right off the deal, because they wanted to do that. So I made my speech and I left, went to the store, ran some errands, came back about 8:30, and I think it was like 9 o'clock before I got to speak, because, I'm well aware of the drill. But, our time is kind of valuable, too, and we would kind of like to do that.
But it's not like they want to stay there till 9, 10, 11 o'clock, especially when they get there
why
at,
did they
8.
keep doing it for decades and decades when they could fix this very easily?
Because not everybody is as smart as you, Roy. I mean, I just that's
There's
I don't have
there's
any
the
other
money
answers
quote
than
of
that.
the evening that we're going to.
Shut up, Roy.
We don't. We can end the show on that note.
Yes. See, you're welcome.
Nobody's as smart as me.
No, nobody is.
You got it. We've had
Freaking
fun
wicked
today.
smart.
And presidents impeached. Maybe we went a long ways to fixing the school board or reshaping the school board's perspective in Moreno Valley.
If only we can reshape.
And
Roy.
that's two areas from the complete opposite ends of the United States of America. And if we can start spreading this and making it work, we will all be better off. As the music's going and we'll be back tomorrow. Mandatory. You be here in 23 hours
Thirsty
at 5 o'clock.
Thursday!
On Thursday of that.
Woo!
We're gone.
We're gone.